Hello and welcome back to What Problem Are You Solving? The greatest innovation podcast chock full of all the best information you could possibly handle. It's great to see you guys again. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's head over to Adam for our icebreaker of the week, which is, of course, what problem are you solving this week? Just one. What problem are you solving, Adam?
Since we have a very important guest, I will honor your request for just one. Keeping the momentum going from our session and doing Ty proud. We had a great session in Dallas, good soil. But the actual problem, rather than just dropping the conference, the problem I want to solve is making sure that we follow through on, I'd say about 50, 60 people. There's still 20, 30 active in the Mighty Networks thread, and, you know, answering questions from as simple as what's an accelerator to, you know, which is equally valid, and then getting into some of the SMART goals, SMART metrics. What should I be measuring this quarter, up to strategy stuff. So I want to make sure that we respond to and honor every single question that comes through that channel, and so that it runs out because they stop asking, not because we stopped listening.
There you go. Sounds like you guys had a great
So just so everybody knows, it was Bishop T.D. Jakes. He has a big ministry. He's out of the ministry now, but he has a leadership and business environment. And we got invited to go and spend 60 minutes with a group of folks. I never interrupt about metrics.
Ty got invited to go, and Ty was gracious enough to include me, and it was epic.
Gracious host. Nice.
It was.
Sounded like a good event.
It was fun. It was fun.
Ty, still riding that high? What problem are you solving this week?
So I am solving how to get my Instagram up and running. So my youngest boy. So Mark, you'll dig this. Do you know Imperial Global, Mark? Do you know those guys over in Northern Virginia? Small company. My fraternity brother actually is the CEO. I introduced him to my son. He hires him. He is now writing. He posted. You go on LinkedIn. He's now writing scripts to track satellites, SSDA, SSS, SSA, SSD, SSD, and like automated like scripts. And it's awesome. And so in his spare time, my computer science son is now he's now like, Dad, what's up with your Instagram? I don't know. You need to have one. And so now I'm just chasing down all these resources for him to put up my Instagram. And so, Adam, I've had the good fortune of taking the clip that Good Soil did, and I have like on Good Soil's page like 800 views, and another on my Instagram page. On my Instagram page, I have on that same thing like 75. I have 178. I've got now 170 plus followers now. So it's a good problem. It's a
what
good
I'm
problem.
Hearing is you ran an experiment. You're getting traction. You're measuring the results.
Look at you. Look at you. Yes, I'm practicing what we preach. Practicing what we preach.
How dare you?
I know. Sorry. But that's the problem. I'm trying to solve a good problem, though.
All right. Special guest, Mark Munsell, former CAIO, CTO, CDO, and any other CO you could think of.
C-suite. Just call me C-suite.
Call me C-money.
What?
Like you collect them all. It's great. What problem are you solving this week, Mark?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a big one. I am trying to grow the St. Louis, Missouri geospatial technology sector ecosystem by starting new companies, attracting new businesses, looking at ways to bring in new talent pipelines, a variety of different ways, methods to increase the overall economic picture of St. Louis, Missouri by bringing in new geospatial technology business.
What? 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 What?
easy peasy, right? You'll knock that out in a week, right? So that's good to hear.
Oh, I'm looking
No,
forward
Will.
to this, to ask you about this, because I know the T-Rex was out there, and I don't have to talk about it now, but we can talk about the T-Rex and what
Yeah.
your relationship is to that, and NSA, not NSA, NGA, which has a big presence in St. Louis. So it'll be interesting to see how the private public comes together. But I know that's for another couple minutes into the show.
Couple
But
minutes.
John, what problem are you solving?
Adam.
Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead,
Adam's
Adam.
right. I'll let you go for it.
Thank God. Normally I sit back, and when we have a special guest, I wait till my spot at the end. All right, Ty. If he wasn't a C-suite and he wasn't an esteemed guest and he was in our panel and he said something like economic development, what would be your first question based on our session last week?
I would be wondering, first of all, defining what that means, right? And then, and I just had this question I was on a chat with some colleagues, like, what's the one metric that matters that lets you know that you're building out economic and that your key indicators are going up to the right and not down to the left as a one metric that matters. That was part of the conversation we had in Dallas, and I was literally having this as we were coming online, chatting with some colleagues about what's one metric that matters, especially when the metrics that are part of the traditional ecosystem are ineffective and inappropriate.
Well said. Nice.
Trying.
Well, as for me, since you asked. No, actually, this one's kind of fun because I'm getting a signal from my current employer. Like, I've done a couple strategy workshops, and I'm getting asked to do more because I enjoy doing that, and apparently I'm cracking some skulls open. So that's always fun to get people to think differently, and as more importantly, actually make some hard choices along the way. So that's I'm just dusting off old Play to Win and Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and a couple other strategy books I got, and it's fun. It's fun to get back in that and to actually get out of the execution phase and more into the, like, why are we doing this in the first place? Like, what problem are we solving phase? A lot of fun.
That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff.
So Mark is a colleague, at least of Ty and myself, for many, many years. We were talking in the green room about trying to figure out who knew who the earliest. But yeah, we've been on a great journey working with Mark over many, many years in many, many different capacities. But we thought when we talk about public versus private innovation, Mark's done it all, right? He's been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, and we thought, what a great way to just come in and let Mark share some of his experiences, some of the challenges and opportunities that are out there for people who are on both sides of this public-private partnership fence, and any other like lessons learned along the way as he goes into his next phase of his career. So Mark, where do you want to start? It's up to you.
We can go back. We can go back to I had my own startup, right? It's something to talk about. It's something interesting that I did back in that day. It's historic, and by that I mean like internet.com boom kind of thing. We can talk about what it means to try to change a bureaucratic behemoth, to go from traditional acquisition processes to building modern software engineering, building software on platforms, changing the security accreditation process, all that stuff I did from like 16 to 20 kind of stuff that I still feel really proud about. I feel proud to be one of the leaders of a group of us. Probably there's maybe 100 of us across the DoD that we're really trying to do that. You got things like software factories out of that, and so, a lot of that kind of energy. Most of that worked. We can talk about what it means to be the director of innovation at NGA. We can talk about all the AI ML stuff, which is over talked about, right? But I certainly had real things, real experiences, and real successes and failures that are interesting. And of course, I obviously want to talk about this new challenge of mine, what it means to build new companies, attract companies, do startups, get venture capital, and to do it in a way that in a city that is very diverse. We have like Boeing Aircraft Company, right? Boeing Defense. We have the headquarters of Enterprise Mobility, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We have all of these sort of big Anheuser-Busch companies that have been around for a long time, multi-billion dollar conglomerates, and what it means to try to do this geospatial thing in this city. So all of these things I think are good subjects.
So I think one thing that to kind of kick things off is one of the reasons that we clicked at work was we had a different mindset. And so if you could kind of summarize some of the challenges and opportunities of kind of being the two pirates in the Navy, right? Like what is it like to have someone who has built things on the outside try to, because that's what I'm getting as the theme and the summary of your career so far has been, how do you innovate? How do you push forward in a bureaucratic environment that's designed to push back and slow things down?
Yeah.
And what successes have you learned along the way?
First half of my career was all hero work, where you find one or two people that can just do it, right? And that's super powerful. And I was one of those people. So all the different projects I worked on from early in my career, I mean, like my very first week at my very first job at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in 1990, they put a computer on my desk and said, "Do you know anything about computers?" And it kind of went from there, because these people knew nothing about computers. I mean, nothing about computers. I had a guy, "Hey, Mark, can you help me with my computer?" And of course, he had no computer. The guys had taken his computer away, but he had a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, and he was convinced they had a computer. So, imagine the opportunity for me as a 22-year-old new employee that had been writing software since I was about 11, when the only computers we had, and that would have been like 1979, 1980, were ones that you built from a kit, right? So I had that experience of, me and my buddy building our own computer and then spending a whole weekend like typing in like Hangman code, like 1,000 lines of code, only to lose it whenever you unplug it, right? Because there's no static. There's no, it's just 1K of RAM is all that it had. So, opportunity from day one. What do you know about these computers? And I started writing software for them, and it turned into pretty sophisticated software. It turned into like, I was converting from like Fortran to C kind of stuff. And it was all like geodetic calculations and this wild surveying software. GPS was new as far as like using it for surveying and navigation and stuff. And, the opportunity, every job that I went to then was to do digital transformation, but it was like me. I was doing the digital transformation, but every single time. I mean, and then when I finally got back to St. Louis, and I finally got back to, this was in Norfolk, and then it was in Silver Spring, right, at the NOAA headquarters. And then I finally got back to St. Louis, and my portfolio at that time was pretty full, or pretty extensive. And I convinced the guys that ran IT in Defense Mapping Agency that I could do anything. And I replaced a $30 million project in 9 months at DMA. The aeronautical system, they still, unfortunately, still use parts of my code 30 years later. Being able to do it was like 80% of the job then. Obviously, as I got older, obviously, as the stuff became more sophisticated, obviously, as I had more responsibility and more leadership capacity, I had to learn how to scale that. And so you guys kind of remember the years where I was trying to scale it for an entire agency by hiring software engineers. That blew everybody's mind. Why would you hire a software engineer?
That's true. Just outsource it, right?
Why would you need that? Have a place for people to code. I don't know if you guys remember, but we designed our computers at our agency to not be able to do code. It was like, we have one requirement for this computer. Don't let anybody write any software on it or install any software on it, right?
That's a good point. That's
Stuff.
a really good
Oh
point.
my God, I didn't realize some of the systems at the agency were designed not to allow
Right.
people. I didn't
For
realize
security reasons, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to lock everything
that.
down.
Understood.
They can
Oh my
perform one
God.
function really well. Yeah. But
So-
so how do you innovate when you're
Yeah.
handed a brick and a monitor? You know?
Exactly. So all the things it would take to do that, and one
Right.
of the things that came out of that was obviously a platform for people to be able to build on. The cloud, you can love and hate the cloud. I don't care. For me, it was a transformation tool because you had to move house. You had to pick up your old stuff in your garage and move it to the new place. And it just so happened that the new place required you to do modern software engineering. So that was like, okay, I don't care how much it costs. I don't care, who owns it, and I don't care what the politics are. We're going to use this as a method to do new modern software engineering practices. So to kind of, that was the way to scale it, was to force people to move from the mindset that we only will buy it. Buying's okay. I completely 100% endorse buying good software and good product, but our people didn't know anything about good software, a good product, because they were not software people, right? They're I don't even know what they were. So no offense, like systems engineers and programmers
not at all.
out there,
But-
because they're,
But you kind of had to been there and done it before, at least once, right? So you know what you're getting into, you know what the environment's like, right?
Yeah. So all of those things were, that was the only way to scale, was to hire people that know how to do that, to change the environment, to go from, individual contract program environments to an enterprise platform where everyone would share code, everyone have a code repository, you'd have a DevOps pipeline. All of that stuff was, for me, very satisfying. I had really good sort of champions doing it, but I was like the ultimate hammer, when Robert Cardillo and Sue Gordon. So there's a story. Robert actually offered me another senior executive job, and I thought it was great. I was going to take it. And then an hour later, Sue Gordon called me and said, "Don't listen to what Robert's saying. I want you to be the deputy of CIOT. I'm going to bring in somebody from the outside, Tanya Pemberton, and she doesn't know the agency very well. You know the agency really well, and I'm going to make you her deputy, and it's going to be great. I give you the night to sleep on it." And so suddenly I had this new power, and I've used it a little bit, like forced people to follow this new method. And I made some mistakes. I was a little too callous with, I would say stuff like, "Hey, I don't need program managers. I need software engineers." And that just flipped a lot of people out, man. That was, that because 99% of the CIOT workforce were, program managers. They were acquisition experts, not software engineers. So kind of working that through and trying to get that expertise in that workforce, build a platform for people to convince our contractors to come in and do this new method. That was the hardest piece, because their method was well calculated to get the margins that they needed to get the it was the cycle that they could predict. And every good company wants a good predictive profit cycle. And doing this new thing was not predictive. So
Mark, I have a question for you, because one of the things that I hear you saying is that you started out, you knew these pieces, but that you had to go from this individual to an enterprise. You had to go from I need program managers to somebody who can actually write code. You had to go from I'm going to bang this up, so John, you got to help me out. You got to go from send your code out to a DevOps model that you at the origination, you might rate some, but eventually it goes someplace else. As you know, the title of the show is What Problem You're Solving. It seems to me in your leadership, you had a hard problem around culture. And I think our guests are going to be interested in hearing, as a senior executive in the United States government, that we already think about as this complex behemoth, the largest, most complex organization on the planet, that in your part, how did you help what did you do to solve that part of the problem? How did you manage that? If you have any wisdom around what that even looks like.
Yeah, it was a multi-pronged approach. You've heard some of it, right? You have to have a place to do it. You have to have some kind of leverage to force people to move. Like in that case, it was the cloud. You had to have some top-down endorsement. I had to get like our director to endorse this activity, and they did. So it was multi-pronged. The most difficult thing for me was to be patient enough to let it take 2, 3, 4 years to let it go. And that's as a person that did things with my own hands for many years and had this sort of hero approach, like I was just going to do it.
Like I know I could knock this out over the weekend. Just give me a 6-pack and 2 pizzas, and I could do this for you by Monday.
A couple times, they moved me around. They were giving me new jobs like every 2 years, and that was kind of discouraging because here I got this thing rolling. I got a lot of people involved. Hey, you got a new assignment. It's better. You get promoted. It's great. And I remember going through some sessions with some folks about that. Hey, I'd like to see this through. And they're like, no, it's going to go through. Don't worry. It started. In fact, they might do better without you, Mark. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right at all. And the reason they could do better without me is because I took a flamethrower every once in a while to the place, and it was good. I burned it down, right? Yeah. And it also made some people upset. And when you walk away, it's healthy, right? The sort of grass will regrow and good things will happen. You did it, you started, you got it going, and someone's going to come behind you. And you guys know these kinds of agencies, this size and this sort of bureaucracy, so much of it is tied to personality. So much of what you're trying to do, the goals you set for your organization, all of that is tied to personality. And so many times the reaction to that personality trait is either jealousy by other executives at your peer level or maybe even above you, or the people underneath you saying, we're going to wait this guy out, right? Every single time. Yep. And so
100%.
When you move on, they're not as jealous, they're not as angry, and they're not waiting you out anymore because you're gone. So a lot of the stuff had set in and started growing. And it took me a couple of moves like that to look back and say, oh no, it's doing great. It's doing awesome. And I'm proud of what we started.
So it seems to me that what you're suggesting is that you also have to have a systems long view, right? that if you don't, you end up like, oh my God, they're not gonna be able to do it. But from a leadership standpoint, you have to have a systems versus a direct impact view. But then again, the question then is additional question is, even as you look back, you moved on, but what did you set up to help people figure out whether or not they're going the right way? So we spend a lot of time on the show talking about OKRs and KPIs and blah, 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 blah. But how would you know, what was the evidence that you had that, you know what, we're actually doing some good stuff, either in the short, or you look back and like, yeah, them guys did it.
Yeah, there were some metrics that we tracked specifically. Like for a few years, the biggest metric was how long does it take to accredit? How long does it take to get software implemented, right? How long does it take to get it accredited? Somebody could spend 6 months sort of coding it up, testing it, get it going, and then spend 2 years. You guys remember that? We spent 2 years getting it through security accreditation.
That is not an exaggeration.
Yeah, and then
baby.
Yeah, and by the time that was over, right? We'd all moved on, and there were no champions for it anymore, and all this weird stuff. And so that we drove that one hard. We drove that one as hard as we could drive to get to the point where, and we felt successful if we were accrediting software in 8, 9, 10 months, right? And guys, they're accrediting software now in a couple of days because of the techniques that we put in place. The platform, right, is 75% of what you're building anyway, already exists. It's accredited. You're only putting 25% on top, and you've automated almost all that accreditation. You run security scans automatically. The code is, like even using AI to find problems in the code for testing, and it does it automatically, so you can accredit it in no time then. I don't look. There's a few things in the government that are hard to measure the impact over a long time, but to go from 2 years to accredit software to 2 weeks to accredit software, that's probably billions of dollars.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it's
so,
exponentially
yeah,
better.
and so that is one thing one metric that we really drove. The other, the other ones are like, you guys, do you remember the software way? So when I left the CTO job and I handed it to Alex Lair, Alex really documented the metrics we were looking for, and he published a document like a 4-page document called the Software Way, and the Software Way had the metrics that in it, right? And like time to delivery. There's an acronym for these metrics, and I'm shamefully have forgotten what it is. Let's look it up.
It's on the tip of my tongue too. Yeah.
Look at these AI summaries now that you get.
As Mark is looking it up, I want to remind people that most of you all will be thinking in terms of an entrepreneur, which exists outside. But imagine being an entrepreneur inside a system. We actually call that an intrapreneur, which is at times exponentially harder because now you're trying to do innovative things in a stone calcified bureaucracy. And
yeah,
so
you put Olympic swimmers in a swimming pool filled with like molasses. Right? Go as fast as you can.
Exactly.
That's what it feels like. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so if you can't think about, I think, context is actually important, right? In these spaces. And so John and I actually existed in a space for a while, and this is where we met Adam, where it allowed us to do innovative work. But that was the context in which we lived. And so they expected us to go and just go and bounce around and have monkey brain all over the place. But Mark, who also is part of the monkey brain crew, had to sit inside a very calcified environment. And so I think it's amazing that you were able to do the stuff that you were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I still don't know the acronym, but the 4 main metrics were availability of the system, of the software, lead time for changes, deployment frequency, and then various very specific product metrics, whatever the product was. But I remember touting how important like deployment frequency was. And man,
was it Dora? Was it the DevOps Dora metrics?
Dora, that's
what
it.
it was. That's Dora. What it was.
Yeah. And
look at you, John.
Yeah.
There we go. I knew it was on the tip of my tongue. There we go.
Anyway, look, availability was horrible. I would go to the Ops Intel in the morning and, read dashboards of stuff that's just down. And I would walk into our team and be like, what are we doing to prevent this? And I don't want to talk about it, but we certainly weren't paying attention. We certainly had no active program action plan to prevent these downtimes. And then, of course, any modern software engineering practice, that's all they worried about was downtime. As soon as they went down, it was like flushing money down the toilet, right? So different culture, different attitudes in government, not our problem. That's that contractor's problem, right? But deployment frequency, let's just talk about that real quick. How often do you deploy code? So how many changes are you making to the code? And then how often do you deploy it? In the era I grew up, you'd be lucky to have 1 or 2 software deliveries a year, right? Every 6 months, you have a big software delivery for the system. Modern software engineering, the big companies, we're talking about hundreds of deliveries a day, maybe thousands of deliveries a day.
Right. Microservices. Yeah.
Yeah. And the measure of a healthy software product one of the key measures of a healthy software product are how well your organization can make updates and deploy those updates. Without destroying everything, obviously.
Sure, and roll back, right?
Yeah, it gets back to your uptime metric. But I was very proud to say that on Maven, we were doing between 50 and 75,000 updates a week.
Holy smokes.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is like software changes, right? 50 to 75,000
Right.
software changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Code pushes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
I remember having a conversation with the commander over at Kessel Run while I was still inside, and he was saying about how they were able to do this update cycle for one of the new Air Force platforms, and they were just like we don't know how we're doing this. We're figuring it out, and I think it was mostly because they had to rethink not the basics of writing code, but how they went and did it. The whole DevOps.
Right.
I mean, obviously you all know this, but it really it felt like a brain change. And as a matter of fact, he told me that Kessel Run was named after, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Star Wars reference. It had something to do with Star Wars. And that's how they had to have people think. There you go. They had to.
Are you guys embarrassed by Ty right now? Are you guys embarrassed by Ty saying that?
One, he made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. I mean, get it right, Ty. Han Solo, baby.
Are you guys going to edit that out or what?
I gotta own my nerdness. It's okay. It's cool. It's
a Star Trek thing,
I'm with
right?
family. Yeah. I'm with family. It's all good. It's all good. But I appreciate that the fact that you all were able to do that. I had a thought about it. And John and I and Adam have had conversations about incentives, right? That incentives seem to be a really important part of this. That you said, I remember sitting inside the building and people won't do it because they get measured on a completely different set of things that are important versus the things that will actually make value differences, because it's value for them, not for a whole nother reason, like, can we have uptime? I don't get paid for uptime. I just get paid to make sure stuff gets through the pipe.
Right.
No matter how long.
Right.
That's right. That's right. And so
and leadership.
And again, these are things I've had to check under my car before I get in kinds of statements. The program culture, right? Paired with program culture, the way we run programs in the government, and it ties all the way back to the way Congress appropriates funds, right? These things are connected. There's a chain. And then the way a contractor performs the work, right? That program culture from Congress must control the kind of money that they're giving you, how you're going to spend it, and when you're going to spend it. Those are tightly controlled. They're never going to write you a blank check. They're not. If you need to do something else that makes more sense with that money, that will end up still resulting in the same result or something even better, you can't do it. They told you to do it this way during this time. And that results in 1 million rules for the program.
Right.
Lost.
All well intended, all for probably a good reason back in the day.
Threatened to go to jail if you don't follow those program rules. That culture is embedded in those program managers from that fear is embedded in them from the very first time they take that class, get that certification, and run the program. Mm-hmm. And then that translates over to the contractor, able to exploit it. They for every change you ever wanted on that contract with that program, they're like, well,
yeah. That was always the open secret was for contractors. The goal was not to be the best value for the lowest price. It was to be the lowest price. So once you got in, it was so hard to get rid of them. Then they could just upcharge you for all of the fixes later. Yeah. No, going in, like a lot of these guys, I mean, fortunately I've never worked for any of those directly, but I know some that did exactly that.
And program culture is set. There are no incentives. There are zero incentives to do it more efficiently.
Right.
If you are running a program and someone comes in and says, hey, we can do this in half the time and give half the money back. They're like, you please leave.
Yeah, do not do that. How dare you suggest that? Yeah.
Right? Or, hey, we can buy this piece over here. We don't need to rebuild it. Yeah, but we've already programmed to rebuild it.
Yeah, we paid for you to build
We've already programmed for that. What are we going to do with that money?
Yep.
It's already on contract.
I used to do, when I was inside the building, I used to do some executive, I guess it was executive coaching. It was unofficial. And one of your former SES colleagues was walking around his office. I won't call him out, but once we get off show, I'll remind you. We go, okay, got it. Walking around, he's like, I don't believe it. It's like, what's wrong, guy? He's like, we just had a conversation where we talked about spending $250K to buy $40K's worth of equipment. And he's like, I didn't know, because it was that kind of disincentive around how we go out and build stuff. And it's a real problem to be solved, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how you get through it by blowing it completely up. Maybe that's what's happening, in the current environment, but it's like, I don't know. I know that there is, I just put in our private chat that Steve Blank has been talking a lot about this. There's a lot of the DIU folks that are really trying to figure this out, the new acquisition policies. But I'm curious, from your perspective, whether or not it is a program thing, or is it a culture thing? We used to talk about red rules, blue rules.
I use the term program culture. Program culture.
Yep.
There you go.
And it's taught from day one.
Yeah, it's I think it's important to think about this. So you talked about a through line of your experience. You had this very early experience. Oh, and by the way, I think you and I are about the same age, Mark. Were you at the computers where they had the big 10, almost 10-inch floppies that you did in the TI-99s, the Radio Shack jobs? Those are the ones I remember.
No,
from 78, 79.
Yeah, but I didn't
floppy? What's a floppy disk? What are you talking
about?
about?
I didn't start with floppies. I started with cassette tapes.
Oh,
I remember those.
Yeah.
I remember those. You put it in there. Yeah. So you had that through line about your experience.
I had a Timex Sinclair 1000. You guys can Google that. Which was built from a kit. I had TI-99 4A. That was the best computer I've ever had, because it had BASIC on it, and it had extended BASIC. There it is. Yeah, that's it. You look at the keyboard. It's one of those little, like with the film on it. Not actual keys. So you imagine typing on that like for 48 hours straight, like start Friday night and then like Sunday morning. So you could play like debug, Hangman. Yeah, that's what we used to do as kids.
Wow.
You get the magazines with the code in it, right? And you just would type it. And it was America.
TI-99, baby.
Look at that computer. I can still smell that computer. That electronic smell, when you get it.
You're not supposed to lick them.
My parents were not.
It might be part of the reason you are the way you are.
My parents didn't have any money, but they would save their money and buy me like a new computer every other Christmas.
And then you had the Commodore 64. Remember those?
I had the Commodore 64.
Oh my God!
It was a brilliant computer.
So how does a guy go from coding on one of those
exactly
elegant designed pieces of hardware to chief AI officer?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I think in most of my jobs, I had a special power, which some of it was attitude. You guys know that. But much of it was like, hey, what would it take to code this? What would it take to build this? Like, who is like, what are they typing on the computer to make it happen? So, right, so much of this is abstracted and people don't even know anymore. But at some point, somebody's writing something, making something somewhere, building something, compiling something. And right, what does it take to do that? And so then to sort of dissect that and go back to what kind of data is it accessing? What formats of the data, what kind of databases and all this kind of stuff. So I think because of that, when somebody came up with something new or some technique, my round of 20 questions were completely different than everyone else's round of 20 questions, especially the other executives. They're just like, this magic thing works. I'll give you $1 million. Sign here.
Yeah. But you had a different.
My thing was, wait, how does this work? What is going on? Who built this? How did it start? And so that line of questioning, obviously, and having that like chief technology officer and all this stuff really, Mark, what do you think about this AI stuff? Right? But this weird stuff's happening over here. And, I took the time to get into it, took time to understand it, look under the hood, do my best to apply it to our particular mission, which was, I have a specialty in that mission as well, the geospatial stuff. And I also, so there was that, just the sort of engineering kind of curiosity, which led me to be a little more familiar, certainly more familiar than the other executives. But then there was the attitude piece. 2017, when Project Maven started, the colonel in charge of Project Maven came to NGA and said, I got this geospatial thing. I got this geospatial AI computer vision thing. Feels like you guys should help me. He wasn't helped. It was very cold. And a lot of it was our research people. A lot of it was our IT people saying, we kind of did this in the past. It didn't work that well. We're not sure it's going to work in the future. Good idea. Not invented here. Thank you very much. And then I had some very, very senior directors, Sue Gordon, and some others say, Mark, is there some way for you to help this guy? Because, it's got a lot of energy in the Pentagon. It's got a lot of people behind it. A lot of people think there's something here with this. We see China putting hundreds of billions of dollars into this. We think there's something here. Will you go help this guy? And the attitude piece, right, that sort of comes with me was, I will help this guy. And that's the other way that this got started, right? And to be fair, that's why Project Maven wound up in NGA. It was a fit. It was GeoInt stuff, all of that. But I think the real reason is early on, I went out and helped the guy, and gave them data and gave them compute, gave them places to work, gave them all that stuff, and nobody else would.
It's interesting because I'm thinking about you as an entrepreneur in that system, and I just wrote this down, that it's attitude meet opportunity. I think that's what entrepreneurs do, right? I have an attitude, can do. I have some technology or some I have some capability, some skill, some technology, and then there's the opportunity and being able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and this guy, you guys know my attitude, but this guy had Marine Corps colonel attitude, which was, I know we got a swear jar here, and I'm not going to do it, but it was like, he didn't care. You were wearing 4 stars on your shoulder. It wasn't pretty. If they walked up to him and said, hey, well, you're wasting your money here, whatever. He had so much attitude, which is exactly what it took to get this going.
It's a good leadership, perspective right there anyway, right? So it's not just having the brains, it's having the tenacity. And
absolutely. And he's cherished for it. To this day, the early team that did Maven, and I got to tell you, the early team that did Maven, holy mackerel, guys. The chief operating officer and legal counsel for Anduril, a bunch of Palantir. I think the director of DARPA, early Maven. The director of DARPA. So early Maven turned into this team of people that, at least had this AI stink on them very early in the department. And the fact that it didn't fail, and the fact that it turned into this thing now, this very big successful program, is why these folks have, little old me wound up as the chief AI officer at NGA, but a lot of people have come out of that program and done great things.
Love it. All right, Adam. I'm going to give you the talking stick before Ty jumps in again.
No, I lost the thread. Right. So you had said, you gave me a perfect segue to move to the St. Louis stuff, but now I'm sort of regretting. And maybe John, do we get an extra half hour? How do we deal with the structure here? We got 15 minutes. We can keep going on the Maven stuff. We got a question in the chat. I know, Mark, you want to talk about the St. Louis stuff, so I want to give you that opportunity, but I also want to be selfish and.
All right, we got you. We got the question in the chat, and then we'll nerd out on St. Louis ecosystem. So go ahead, Adam. What's your question?
Nope, there was no question. It was the sec. It was the set. You were saying like giving them space, giving them this, giving them. It was like the perfect segue to giving them space in St. Louis. So we'll go straight to this.
You're too kind. All right, so Joel from LinkedIn says, what are the most important geospatial data layers that AI should prioritize specifically for rapid disaster response? Infrastructure damage, population density, environmental risks.
Yeah,
By the way, this is one of my students.
Yeah, great. No, what a great question. And Adam, what's great about this question is it ties right into St. Louis. So I'm very opinionated about this. Let me throw in this phrase, digital twin, real quick, right? So a lot of people, hey, let's build a digital twin. Let's build a digital twin of a city. And what you wind up with is like this high resolution terrain model, or you can fly around the city and things like that. That's cool, but it's only cool for a second. What's cool, right? What's cool about a digital twin is when you actually twin the infrastructure, when and it's a functional twin. So like, the water system, the sewer system, the electric system, all the utility systems, the firehouses, the police stations, everything about like a city's infrastructure, including the entire emergency response structure, 911, ambulances, medicine, hospitals, all of debris removal, all of these things, those things need to be twinned, right? As opposed to just this cool 3D model. And so in this case, we had devastating tornadoes come through about a month ago in St. Louis. And it wrecked. What's interesting about these tornadoes, if you look at the map that they came through, it started out coming in from the west, and it wrecked this sort of really high-end part of the town, of very rich people, very wealthy neighborhoods, and then it came through the very poor part of town and just destroyed these homes. I mean, old brick homes where the front faces just fell off, like you're in your living room on your couch, and then the whole front of your house just like falls into the street. And so St. Louis failed in many cases here because they didn't have good digital infrastructure there it is. Good digital infrastructure on, first of all, to track where the damage was, and not good infrastructure, not good digital mapping infrastructure of what needed to be repaired and what resources you could pull from to respond to it. So one good thing that came out of this was the city to sort of realize that we have thousands of geospatial experts, technologists, analysts, GIS experts in the St. Louis area, and not really putting their money where their mouth is in terms of being able to put together a really good infrastructure, GIS infrastructure, and have a team that's able to do this. I've seen good responses. There's been a couple, Romo GIS, if you go look at my LinkedIn, I reposted that a few days ago. He's doing a great job. He's got a great dashboard up there to be able to track relief spots and things like that. So the most critical would be the basics, like building outlines. I know that sounds like so basic, but it's very difficult to have good, accurate building footprints. There's some really cool stuff happening out there for that. And then all the utilities and all the emergency response systems, make sure you have those in a GIS to be able to coordinate response.
Did you see his follow-up question? Because I think it's a really interesting question he's asking as well. And I think it's the underserved, under-resourced regions around AI. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. So in this case, right, much of that sort of middle North St. Louis underserved, under-resourced population, there's the city is still responsible for those areas. Period. Dot. Right. And the problem with sort of mapping those areas is you don't have current data because you don't know if the house is even viable anymore. You don't know if people are living in it. You don't know if they're squatting in it. You don't know if there is utilities going to the house. There, or they could be building fires in the house, cooking in the, all of these things, gas, propane, or whatever. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is not having current, accurate. There's not a lot of digital exhaust that comes out of there. Maybe you could do like spooky stuff like track phones and phone exhaust, but you really want infrastructure mapped and those data layers very healthy to be able to do this. And it's a lot of cities, unfortunately, I think maybe it's a one-time shot. They're going to spend $1 million, they're going to spend $5 million in mapping it, but like the next day they're like, we'll do this again in 5 years. That's a mistake. You got to keep.
Oh yeah, you got to feed the beast. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we got 9 minutes left. I'm curious, and I'm with Adam on this. So what would this look like as an entrepreneurial enterprise?
Yeah.
Like just what Joel is putting out there, because I could think already. I know this guy. I talked to him. I've worked with him a few times. Smart guy. Like, what would be the entrepreneurial thing that, at least if he was come to St. Louis, that you would say, hey, listen, here's an opportunity. Because that's what that's where opportunity meets preparation. That's luck, right?
I think there's lots of cool ideas. You guys go to Romo GIS, see it. That guy's from Detroit, but he came to St. Louis to offer his expertise. Go down and look at he's got the Love the Lou site, and you see the dashboards that he's made of where people are providing relief, how to get it. Go to his site. See some of the stuff that he's doing. I mean, so in this case, this guy's not inventing anything new. He's not writing necessarily new software. He's not doing research. He's not using quantum computing, right? He's using GIS as a tool applied to solve a particular problem. And there's that sort of entrepreneurial spirit to be able to get up out of your chair and go to the problem area and fix it. That's beautiful. And you guys know this, like geospatial and GIS, that's like 75% of the game. Maybe you're doing some research. Maybe you got a new algorithm with commercial imagery. Maybe it's able to detect something you've never been able to detect before. Maybe you're mixing a large language model with a computer vision model. That's new, right? Crossing these multimodal things. Those are all new research sort of areas. Romo GIS.
I think I heard a former director of NGA paraphrase to say that, all this other data and intelligence is great, but it all happens somewhere on the earth, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, right, you have to have a point in time and place where this stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so I think you're absolutely right that it is a killer.
Much of this is just applied. It's just apply this technology to this particular problem. It's not always the same. Maybe there's a playbook, maybe there's a pattern, but just apply it.
So what are you doing in St. Louis? Tell us about your new.
So are you orchestrating this? Yeah.
So this particular example is a good example of the kinds of things that need to happen in St. Louis. What I just said here could be the beginnings of a particular initiative, particular project. Maybe we get a grant. Maybe there's a couple of universities that get together. Maybe there's some workforce development things for high schoolers and college kids, right, to sort of tackle this. Maybe it's a big Department of Homeland Security Weather Service grant, right, that you come in and build this thing out. So that's an opportunity to do something new, bring some jobs. do something else. There's tons of opportunities for this applied thing that we're talking about, fighting crime, right? As creepy and NGA-ish as it sounds, maybe you have a better use of drones by the police force. Maybe, if those of us that have fought in, not fought, but helped people fight in wars, having video overhead, and when a crime is committed or a terrorist act is committed, and be able to play that back to see where they originated from. These are all concepts and ideas that could help domestic, crime fighting.
Sure.
But so I'm talking about these sort of applied initiatives of our tradecraft to this city's problem. But the thing that and Ty, you started this conversation about what's the big metric. We really hold the sort of classic metric here, which is, are you bringing employment, right, to the city? And there's a lot of different ways to sort of measure that. There's a lot of different angles to that. We measure it in geographic areas. We measure it by demographics. There's all these different ways to measure that. But if you can bring more employment to this city in this sector, we will ring the bell one job at a time, right? We will be like, good job. Romo GIS, you brought in 2 people for the next year to work this issue, ring the bell. And so lots of different investment opportunities, venture capital, research, university research, all these things are big, highbrow kind of big money, put big money into this and hope 10 years later or 20 years later, something magical pops out of it. All that stuff's good. Some of that's in jeopardy with this current administration. All of it's good. But the metric that we're going to count on is, are you bringing jobs in? So for us, I'm not ashamed to go convince a company to move to St. Louis, right? And everything that it takes to do that. Hey, Mark, will you help us get a contract with NGA? Yes, I'll help you get a contract with NGA. Everything that it would take to convince a company, Mark, will you help us find an office, a cheap office? Yes, yeah, I got it. And so from that to a startup, somebody with a good product idea, maybe they're not in St. Louis, maybe they're in Detroit, like Romo GIS, maybe they're in Silicon Valley. And it just so happens that they have some computer vision application that they want to hook up with a Boeing supplier here in St. Louis because they think that their sensor that they could build might be big in defense. Please come and talk to me, right? All of these different ag tech is huge in St. Louis, and the crossover between agriculture technology and geospatial, that's a huge overlap, right? From precision drone, precision agriculture, the type of remote sensing that you would want to do for agriculture, that crossover is huge. If you have an idea, product, service that you want to explore, this region is a great place for that for many, many different reasons.
So it sounds like you're pulling this all together. What are you calling this thing, Mark?
So it was called GeoFutures. So it's an effort. This is run out of Greater St. Louis Inc. It's a nonprofit economic development organization in St. Louis. It's being rebooted now. This GeoFutures thing is being rebooted. We're refreshing this strategy. We're putting together a more detailed implementation plan, and we're designing and starting a new organization to do that work. So all this stuff is happening right now. I have about 20 or so participants around the community, all the way from sort of nonprofits to workforce development to Boeing, right? You put all this together and bring everyone together. I got people like Robert Cardillo, Bob Sharp that are on these boards to be able to kind of bring this along. And we all have the same goal, and that's to bring prosperity and economic development and jobs, and new companies to the St. Louis region.
Yeah, that's a great way to roll this up. Ty, Adam, any last shout outs before we go?
Adam, go ahead.
He ended, so I knew as soon as he wrapped it up at the 30-minute mark that I wasn't going to get the 15 minutes that I was going to ask for. But, just again, going back to the session that Ty and I did last week, you have this long-term SMART metric, which is jobs or employment. And then you have all these short-term ideas and different partners and good early stage startups and the university. And so I would, if I had a magic wand, I would spend the next hour.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll bring you back again, like kind of defining the objective, sort of the recipe, the short-term recipe. I know there was an accelerator. We were doing some research for a book I happened to write on this topic with Paolo, of course. Wasn't there an accelerator that ran in St. Louis a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
It had about 3 cohorts. Was that the harbinger of this, or? And I know, John, you want to wrap this up. But we can continue in the chat if we must. Can we get, John? Do I get 3 minutes to talk about that accelerator from a few years ago?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yes, thank God. All right. So was that the first? Was that affiliated with this? Was that an experiment that led to some of this thinking?
So that was run out of Moonshot Labs, which I founded at the T-Rex. Right. That's an NGA activity space at the T-Rex in St. Louis. T-Rex is like an incubator, entrepreneurial support, right thing. And so, yep. We, Senator Blunt, helped fund a lot of activities at Moonshot Labs over those several years, and we used some of that funding to sponsor that accelerator. And that accelerator was a great success. Let me give you 2 sort of comments about it that I wish would have been better. I wish NGA would have given contracts to these folks when they were done. But it was great because they won all kinds of contracts with like the DIU and the Space Force, and these companies went on to win a bunch of work, just not with NGA. That's disappointing to me. And the other thing is none of those companies were from St. Louis and wound up in St. Louis. So that's strike 2. No strike 3 yet. I'm going to figure out a way to get another accelerator sponsored here in the area with this new work that I'm doing.
Would you say the next chapter of your work is to solve those 2 problems specifically?
Yes. We're certainly, there will be this sort of unspoken evil eye that you get from me if for some reason I
got a P.O. box in St. Louis. That counts, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll get the Mark evil eye. Yeah.
No. Look, T-Rex is great. A lot of people hang their shingle at T-Rex. But the point of hanging your shingle in T-Rex is that you're there and you're with the other people in T-Rex. Right. And you're a collective. People hang their shingles and they're out east, and that kind of defeats the purpose. Let me give you guys 2 websites.
Okay.
biostl.org. I'm trying to get into the chat here, and it's giving me weird errors about.
I got it. Don't worry.
Okay. biostl.org. Mm-hmm. Brilliant organization that is doing sort of biomedical research and biomedical startups. Yep. Driving St. Louis innovation by doing these things: access to capital, developing inclusive workforce. Right. Brilliant. So. My thing, you could replace bio and put geo in front of it, and it would read the same way here, right?
Nice.
And the other thing is to check out is 39 North, like the latitude, 39 north.org. It's a similar organization for agriculture tech. Both of these organizations in St. Louis to do what I've been describing for the last 10 or 15 minutes here.
I love it.
It's particularly agricultural tech. Now think of the same thing that you're seeing here, but for geospatial.
Nice. Awesome.
You just dropped some major stuff. The only thing that I have is for anybody that's listening, technology is one thing, but the only value that really happens is when you apply it. that's when it becomes really, really significant. And so that's what I want to have. And I know that John's going to wrap us up, but I want to ask you, who do you think we should talk to next based on this conversation and the way that's gone?
What? Yeah.
Get back to us. How about that?
Have your people call our people. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what direction you guys want to go. I can sort of give you a great candidate based on your wishes and wants and your whims. So you let me know.
So I'm going to go nominate guys, John and Adam. I'm going to nominate Sue Gordon, who I do know and I've done some work with. Yeah. And maybe even, do you know Carmen Medina? Mark, do you know Carmen?
No.
She was Rebels at Work. She worked at the agency for a while. Yeah. Really, really brilliant woman. But I know did some work for Sue back in the day. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But think about it. Let's give us a couple of names.
Yeah.
John, over to you.
All right. This has been fantastic. We'll see you all next week.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right.